The FIA, the governing body of Formula One, has been at the center of controversy throughout 2024, with the situation escalating dramatically in the past month. Reports of mass firings, corruption, and a startling defense from FIA President Mohammed bin Sulayem have further tarnished the organization's reputation. There are growing concerns about the future governance of Formula One, as the increasingly unpopular president seems to be creating a structure within the FIA that could make him impossible to remove. Today, I'll take a closer look at the rule changes he's introducing, which would place him above the laws of his own organization, making him untouchable, and why Formula One may be powerless to stop it. Stay tuned. The management of Formula One by the FIA has been under heavy scrutiny throughout 2024. Drivers have been vocal about the inconsistency of race directors and stewards. At times, debates over the decisions made by race control have dominated media coverage, overshadowing the actual action on the track. I've seen your comments and calls for Formula One to break away from the FIA, and later in this video, I'll explore the challenges involved in making that happen. But before we dive into that, let's focus on the latest move by the FIA president to remove democracy from the organization. Yesterday, FIA President Mohammed bin Sulayem, referred to as MBS from here on, proposed a series of changes to the statutes governing the audit and ethics committees within the FIA. These revisions have been sent to member clubs for approval, with a vote scheduled at the FIA General Assembly on December 13th. Currently, the audit and ethics committees operate independently of the FIA president, allowing them the freedom to raise issues or concerns about MBS's actions. This independence provides a crucial check and balance within the organization, enabling these committees to address potential wrongdoing or conflicts of interest without fear of retaliation from the president. If approved, the proposed revisions would strip the audit and ethics committees of their independence, requiring them to report directly to the FIA president and the president of the FIA Senate, instead of to the broader Senate. Additionally, the changes would remove the audit committee's ability to independently investigate financial matters. The issues with these changes are immediately apparent, and I'll dive into those in more detail shortly. But first, let's explore the context behind why MBS might be seeking to undermine the autonomy of the audit and ethics committees. Starting with the audit committee, its role within the FIA has been to act as an independent body responsible for ensuring that the organization's finances are managed in compliance with its own regulations. Just last week, reports surfaced that the FIA had dismissed 2 members of this committee who had been scrutinizing its financial practices. Their firing followed concerns they had raised regarding a $1.5 million fund that was set up at MBS's suggestion. This fund has attracted attention due to its lack of transparency and potential conflicts of interest, which likely prompted the scrutiny from the audit committee members before their dismissal. During a meeting of the 4-person audit committee, concerns were raised about the appropriateness of MBS proposing a $1.5 million fund to be offered to international motoring clubs whose votes would be crucial for his re-election bid in 2025. The timing and nature of this proposal raised red flags, as it seemed to directly link the allocation of funds to votes that could influence the president's political future. The $1.5 million fund was reportedly to come from MBS's personal expense allowance, which raised further questions about the transparency and ethics of how the FIA's finances were being managed. The idea of using personal allowances for such a significant sum of money, especially in a situation where the recipients have voting power over his position, sparked concerns about possible conflicts of interest and improper financial practices. In February, the Audit Committee received alarming information from the Finance Department regarding the administration of funds allocated for the president's expenses. The most pressing issue was the absence of receipts, a serious concern as it violated French law. Since the FIA is headquartered in France, it is subject to local legal requirements, including the necessity of keeping receipts for expenses. This violation of legal protocols further compounded the doubts about how the FIA's finances were being managed under MBS's leadership. When MBS was asked to provide receipts in order to comply with French law, he chose to stop using his $1.5 million expense allowance altogether. Instead, he proposed creating a new fund, the President's Development Fund, which would be financed by the same allowance. This raised even more concerns within the audit committee, especially given that the lack of receipts had already cast doubt on how his allowance had been used before this decision. Moreover, the establishment of the fund was seen by many as a potential attempt to secure votes for his re-election campaign in 2025 by distributing money to motoring clubs, further undermining the integrity of the process. The firing of half of the audit committee members and the proposed revisions to the statutes, which would strip the committee of its independence to investigate, are widely perceived as a direct response from MBS to the scrutiny and investigation he faced. By weakening the audit committee, MBS would be removing a significant check on his financial activities and consolidating his power. Similarly, the revisions to the statutes regarding the ethics committee appear to be motivated by a desire to stifle investigations into MBS's conduct. These changes come in response to an ongoing ethics committee investigation targeting him. Last month, the FIA's compliance officer Pal Bazari was dismissed. Bazari's role was to ensure that all FIA staff adhered to the organization's code of ethics, and his removal raises further questions about the FIA's commitment to maintaining ethical standards under MBS's leadership. In his role as compliance officer, Pal Bazari reported MBS to the Ethics Committee for allegedly interfering with the outcome of a Formula One Grand Prix and attempting to cancel another race. One of the incidents involved the 2023 Saudi Arabian Grand Prix, where MBS reportedly intervened to overturn a penalty given to Aston Martin's Fernando Alonso. The penalty, a 10-second penalty, was imposed for work being done on Alonso's car while he was serving a 5-second penalty. Allegedly, MBS called the FIA's vice president for sport in the Middle East and North Africa, who was in Saudi Arabia for the race, and argued that the penalty should be revoked. Following this intervention, the 10-second penalty was indeed rescinded after the race. The second incident took place during the Las Vegas Grand Prix, where MBS allegedly instructed officials not to certify the circuit for use. These officials were reportedly directed, on behalf of the FIA president, to find a way to declare the circuit unsafe for racing. Blocking the Las Vegas Grand Prix would have been a significant blow to Formula One's commercial rights holder, Liberty Media, with whom MBS has been in an ongoing power struggle since taking office as president of the FIA. This alleged interference highlights the growing tension between MBS and Formula One's commercial interests, and it raises concerns about his influence over race outcomes and decisions. Despite these serious allegations, MBS was cleared by the Ethics Committee on both charges. However, Pal Bazari faced repercussions for his actions. His position as compliance officer, which was meant to be protected from termination by the FIA president, could only be terminated through a vote in the FIA Senate. However, no such vote was held before his dismissal, raising significant concerns about procedural violations and the potential for bypassing proper governance. What we are witnessing are two committees within the FIA, the Audit Committee and the Ethics Committee, both facing direct challenges to their independence and authority under MBS's leadership. These moves highlight a broader trend of undermining the checks and balances within the organization, further consolidating MBS's control and making it harder for these bodies to hold him accountable. The FIA is meant to ensure that the organization operates ethically and transparently, adhering to its own laws and statutes. However, under MBS's leadership, crucial mechanisms for accountability are being dismantled simply for performing their roles. By stripping the audit and ethics committees of their independence, MBS is essentially positioning himself above the rules of the very organization he leads, granting himself unchecked power. While the FIA will technically remain a democratic organization with a presidential election next year, no one has yet announced their candidacy to oppose MBS. This creates a situation where MBS can use FIA funds, including the controversial President's Development Fund, to secure votes in his favor. Moreover, with full control over the audit and ethics committees, he becomes untouchable within the organization. In practice, even though the FIA may retain the appearance of a democracy, it risks operating like a dictatorship under MBS's control. For those familiar with the 2015 FIFA corruption scandal and how that organization was run, much of this will sound disturbingly familiar. Whenever the FIA is discussed in our videos, there are always comments suggesting that Formula One should simply break away from the FIA. Unfortunately, it's not as simple as Formula One deciding to create its own set of rules and parting ways. The FIA is an enormous organization that governs much more than just Formula One, and its influence extends beyond the sport. Crucially, the FIA owns the rights to the Formula One brand, which makes any potential separation much more complicated. F1's commercial partner, Liberty Media, leases the rights to the Formula One brand from the FIA. This means that if Formula One were to split from the FIA, it would lose the ability to use the name Formula One, resulting in a major commercial setback for the series. For a breakaway to happen, Liberty Media and all the teams involved would need to reach a consensus on the decision and create an entirely new brand, which is a complex and costly process. The FIA, however, would not simply allow Formula One to fade away. It is the crown jewel of their organization. If a new series were created by the current teams and Liberty Media, it would directly compete with the FIA's Formula One, a scenario the FIA would likely resist fiercely. Assuming Liberty Media and the teams were willing to accept this challenge, they would face another major obstacle: organizing and running the races themselves. The FIA currently holds a monopoly over many crucial aspects of the sport. It writes the sporting rulebook, trains and manages the stewards and race directors who enforce those rules, and funds the local motorsport clubs that provide track marshals. The FIA also inspects circuits to ensure they meet safety standards for hosting races and accommodating spectators. Without the FIA's certification, circuits would likely face difficulties obtaining the necessary insurance to host events. Moreover, the FIA would be in a position to pressure circuits to avoid hosting races for any breakaway series. Given the FIA's dominance in international motorsport, tracks like Silverstone, for example, could face significant consequences for cooperating with a new independent series. The FIA's extensive influence over motorsport infrastructure makes the prospect of a clean break even more challenging. If Silverstone agreed to host a race for a breakaway series, the FIA could retaliate by declaring, "Go ahead, but you'll no longer be allowed to host any FIA-sanctioned events." Such a move would financially cripple the circuit, as a large portion of its income comes from FIA-affiliated motorsport events, such as Formula One. The financial and reputational consequences of losing FIA events would be severe, making it a difficult decision for any circuit to consider a split. But this scenario is just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to the challenges of breaking away. A significant portion of Formula One's investment comes from the Arabian Peninsula, particularly Saudi Arabia, where MBS holds considerable influence. This relationship could make any attempt to establish a rival series much more complicated, especially given the political and financial power involved. Additionally, legal issues surrounding a split from the FIA would create more hurdles, making the process of setting up and marketing a new series an overwhelming financial and logistical challenge. Beyond these obvious obstacles, there are many other issues that we, as fans, might not even be aware of, further complicating the idea of a clean break. So, is breaking away from the FIA technically possible? Yes, in theory, it could be done. But in practice, the challenges of starting a new series make it virtually insurmountable. Finally, why is the growing corruption within the FIA and MBS's increasingly autocratic leadership not more widely criticized or discussed? The answer lies in the FIA's control over media access. The organization has the power to decide which media outlets are granted on-track privileges, including access to the paddock, pit lane, and press conferences. This control over media access essentially allows the FIA to limit critical coverage and shape the narrative surrounding its actions. Without broad media coverage and independent scrutiny, issues like corruption and autocratic leadership are more easily swept under the rug, making it harder for fans and outsiders to hold the FIA accountable. If major motorsport media such as Autosport or The Race, which rely heavily on Formula One coverage, were to speak out too vociferously against the FIA or its management, the FIA could easily revoke their passes. This would effectively silence these publications, denying them access to key areas of coverage such as in-depth race reports or interviews. In turn, this would deny them the ability to cover the sport with the same degree of insight and detail, limiting the public's access to independent analysis. Similarly, if broadcasters such as Sky Sports become too critical of the FIA, They too could suffer a similar fate, being stripped of their right to film at tracks or interview in the paddock. The FIA's control over media access allows it to effectively suppress dissent and ensure that only favorable or neutral stories reach the public. This gives the FIA considerable power over its public image, determining how it is presented to fans and the general public. This raises a troubling question. How do you feel about MBS's growing control over the FIA? Are you concerned about what this means for the future of Formula One? Share your opinions in the comments. Thanks for watching this video to the end. If you are interested in Formula One body, subscribe so you don't miss anything. See you in the next videos.